Hi, everyone, and welcome to ICARE's Litigating and Legislating for Animal Rights seminar series. I'm so happy to see so many people joining us from around the world for the sixth seminar in the series, where we continue to discuss how legislative reforms and strategic litigation can be mobilized as useful instruments to recognize and enforce animal rights. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ana Caramuru Aubert, and I'm the moderator of the seminar. I'm a legal scholar from São Paulo. Right now, I'm based in São Paulo. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today, which is centered on how animal advocates use the law to challenge unlawful violence and systemic abuse against animals in slaughterhouses, especially where legal protections may exist on paper, yet enforcement consistently fails animals in practice. So without further ado, I'm excited to welcome our guests for today's conversation, Sabina Bravo and Caroline Lanti. Thank you so much for being with us today. Could you please start by introducing yourselves to our audience and telling us a little bit about your work, your organizations? Sabina, maybe you could start.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for the introduction to this seminar. Thank you for having me also, ICARE. I'm a law graduate from Chile. Have been working in animal advocacy for many years now. I am also the founder and executive director of Animal Law Focus, an organization I set up in September 2024, which works on behalf only of farm animals. We are focused only on farm animals from Chile to various other countries across the global south, specifically Latin America. Our work focuses on administrative strategy through the public services that oversee the animal industry, combined with strategic litigation and research based on access to public information. We use existing tools to improve compliance, enforcement, close any legal loopholes that may exist that are not beneficial for animals. Thank you.
Caroline.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for this introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Caroline Lanti, and I am a lawyer at the Paris Bar since 20 years now. My work focuses on representing animal and environmental protection associations and foundations, and mostly alongside with my colleague L214, also lawyer in France. I serve as one of the two legal counsel for the organization L214. I don't know if all of you know about L214. It's animal protection organization that was created in 2008. And L214 is dedicating to exposing the conditions of animal farming, transport, and slaughter, and advocating for an evolution of practices to eliminate the most terrible abuses and thereby fostering a society that no longer views animals like resources as its disposal. So I work with them on legal action, political action also, and contribution towards consumer, the public, and the industrial organization on animal industry in order to enable better practice and the end of the practice that brought a lot of abuse to animals.
Well, thank you both for being here. We're so lucky to have you guys here with us. I'd like to start with a question for both of you. So when you look at what animals are made to endure in slaughterhouses, what kinds of violations come up most often? What keeps recurring and what laws are usually being breached in those situations? So Sabina, please start, and then I'd love to hear from you, Carolyn.
Well, in our research over the last 2 years, we have come across all kind of violations in the breeding, transport, and slaughter of animals. all those three phases. But without a doubt, the most common violation and most glaring in terms of cruelty are the violations at the moment of the animal's death, at the moment of the slaughter, which reach a specific decree in Chile. We have a specific decree for the moment of slaughtering that sets out the conditions under which this must be carried out, the standards that have to follow. But what happens is that the animals are not properly stunned before they're being killed. So they're conscious and can feel everything right up until their final moment. That is our like most common violation that we've run into. We classify this type of violation as involving a high level of cruelty. There are also repeated violations regarding the handling of animals during transport or prior to death, and animals being left for more than 24 hours without food or water, exposed to climate conditions, a practice that is unfortunately very common in birds. So, yeah, I will say that those are the most common violations uh, that we run into in our research, specifically the slaughter, and we do have a law specific for the slaughter, so they're infringing one specific law.
Thank you, Sabina. Caroline.
Well, to answer your question, why one's first instinct might be to say it's just a museum of horrors, because what we see in Slaughterhouse is in fact a distillation of the violence inflicted on animals. And for a very long time, I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but it was in France, slaughterhouses were regarded as a lawless zone for animals. They were there to be slaughtered. So the question was, why grant them with protection as they're living their last moments? And finally, the sole focus of the authorities, of the veterinarian, was focusing on sanitary rules and the quality of the meat. There was absolute no consideration and no attention was paid to the animal, and above all, any record of any infringement. You could do whatever you want. And even if there was European and national regulation governing animal welfare in slaughterhouse, I always put that into quotation mark because it's always deeply unsettling to talk about welfare in relation to animals that are about to die in an unfamiliar environment, who see other animals being herded, handled, abused, and killed next to them right before their eyes or in their immediate sound environment. And we also observe, like you said, unsuitable facilities, malfunctioning equipment that cause deep suffering to the animals, high-powered bolt guns, restrainer devices, rotary boxes that don't fit correctly. But unfortunately, we also observe animals that were unfit for transport because they were injured. We also had pregnant females in advanced stage of pregnancy, and that normally you cannot brought to slaughterhouse. But as long as there is no control and no observation when they leave the farm and during the transport, you have female that are about to deliver when they arrive in slaughterhouse. And as you said, from our experience and mine, the most frequent and disturbing violation in slaughterhouse is around ineffective stunning and poor handling practices. Animals are often inadequately stunned, meaning or they regain consciousness or they remain fully conscious during the most painful stage of slaughter. And even if this directly breaches EU and French regulation, we observe that, and even if the official veterinarians are supposed to be in the slaughterhouse on the line of slaughter to observe the problems before the animals are being killed, all the cases that we have show that there is absolutely no observation, no stop by the people of the slaughterhouse in auto-regulation and by the authorities. You never have spontaneously an action of the veterinarians to say, you do wrong, now stop. Because you have to do high speed, you have to put to death an incredible amount of animals in a small time, and all that you have a lack of application of regulation in slaughterhouse on each stage and each items that is normally organized and viewed by the law.
Thank you, Caroline. I think that in a way you have both touched upon my second question, but we often hear about a gap between the law on paper and what happens in practice. So in your view, is this mainly an enforcement issue, which you guys have mentioned regarding control and so on? Or does it also reflect deeper limitations in how the law itself is designed, or in political will? In other words, are violations the exception, or do they tell us something about how the system normally operates? Let's begin with you, Caroline, and then turn to Sabina.
Well, to answer, the gap is both an enforcement issue and a reflection of deeper systemic limitation. While inadequate enforcement due to insufficient resources or political will certainly plays a major role, the law itself is often designed with compromises. We can have, for example, the derogation for ritual slaughter without stunning, which is permitted under EU law. It's a kind of example of a legal provision that prioritizes religious freedom over another fundamental principle of preventing animal suffering. And therefore, violations are not merely exception, they are unfortunately symptomatic of how the industrial animal production system normally operates. And the current legal framework often sets minimum standards that are difficult to enforce. That's what I said, in high speed, high volume, making suffering an inevitable consequence of the practice itself in slaughterhouse. So this is very difficult for us to help to make practice go better, because we have to conclude that the way it goes on is very difficult to be changed.
I agree completely with Caroline. I wanted to say that, but specifically in Chile's case, that is our current country we're investigating, violations are the norm and clearly stem from an enforcement issue. Inspections are few and far between, and often word gets around that inspectors are due to visit the facility so on a certain day, so they try to sort everything out to avoid fines. But for the rest of the year, we know that the conditions in which the animals are kept and treated are very poor. But beyond enforcement, I will say that specifically for Chile's case, what we have seen is that the law itself contains significant loopholes that companies exploit to their advantage or use as a defense when accused of a violation. For example, we had a case that the fact that corneal reflex was considered a sign of consciousness by veterinarians is not specified in the relevant degree of slaughter, and is largely left to the discretion of the vets conducting the inspection. It is also the case that there are no objective criteria for assessing these offenses. So it's mainly based on subjective criteria from the regional director that is reviewing the case, the infraction specifically. And yeah, in that case specifically, the director chose to back up the vet's position, but technically the company was right. I mean, there is no specific mention of the corneal reflex as as a sign of consciousness. So if we were in a court, probably that argument would be very valid because it is not mentioned anywhere. At least in our law, would be very valid because, well, we have another kind of system of law, different from the global north. But for us, will be valid if the law does not mention that specifically in any document that are binding document. One company, I mean, also like based on this subjective criteria, different outcomes depending could arise depending the region. One company, for example, may be allowed more offenses before being shut down, which others are not, or there may be variations in the amounts of fines, even when the offenses are the same. No minimum threshold is established, so to speak. For instance, there is no set number of offenses a company must have committed within a specific time frame before it is shut down without exception. It depends entirely on the person that is assessing the case at that time. So I think, of course, it's an enforcement issue. It's poor resources from the service that is in charge of the animal industry inspections, but also the system is creating some way that doesn't allow, like right now, to improve anything for animals at the way that it is right now. Like the system beyond the loopholes, also the system that conducts like the standard the directors and the regional directors, the inspectors have to follow when assessing these cases. That's what I mean.
Following on that, what conditions do you think, and again, both of you, tend to make this violence possible in practice? For instance, speed, lack of oversight, poor training, desensitization, production pressure, or something else? Caroline, would you like to start?
Yes, I often say it's animal protection organization against the rest of the world, and everybody fails and lacks at each stage where he should be acting the correct way. So the violence we witness in slaughterhouses is enabled by multiple factors. Firstly, we've told about it. It's extreme production pressure and high line speeds, which are very critical problems. But often you have also workers who are forced to process animals like a material at an unsustainable rhythm, leading to shortcuts, errors in stunning and handling. Secondly, you have a real lack of effective oversight. We always observe there is nobody inside slaughterhouse that knows the regulation. You don't have any director. You don't have any director with a kind of animal protection observation to do. So there is a big lack of effective oversight, and which means that the violation persists always and always. Thirdly, we can talk about poor training and what you said, desensitization among the staff that contribute highly and significantly to the problems we see. Finally, we can talk about the inherent thing that animals are viewed purely as commodities rather than sentient beings. So that makes their suffering easily dismissed in favor of economic efficiency. And in fact, as you have the people working in slaughterhouse, the director of the slaughterhouse, the official veterinarians of the slaughterhouse, no one of them is there to take care of animals. It's not their problem. So you have animals which are confined, silent, that cannot say anything about what they but how they suffer, and there is nobody inside to say, okay, stop this is a breach of regulation. You have to do this that way. This is very painful. You have no animal friend in any places in slaughterhouse. So it's very difficult, and it's why the work of organization is very important to make to bring to justice, to bring to the consumer, to bring to the public what is happening, because it's used to be a very close house.
Perfect. Sabina, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I agree with what Caroline says, but I wanted to add some perspective at that. I think the problem is that yeah, they lack of supervision of a lot, but they're so used to handling large numbers of animals that stuff end up going through the motions like very automatically and stop paying attention to key details of the process, such as ensuring that the birds, in this case, are properly stunned before going through the scalding machine. So I think that this is also talks about like a sort of like a disconnection from the work to the process that they are doing in front of them. Many companies also do not have on-site vets who can set guidelines on animal welfare, can supervise. They don't pay vets to be there. They don't have any stuff of that. There may also be a lack in training, of course, in animal welfare and insufficient like supervision from the owner of the company. Sometimes when defending themselves against the fines they're accused, they're issued, the owners of these companies claim that the worker acted on their own initiative. In other words, they are not even aware of what happens on a day-to-day basis inside there. But there are cases where the number of animals is not so high, as such with cows, which are larger animals, yet regulations where are still not being followed because they use incorrect stunning or slaughter methods, such as electricity combined with cold water spray. I believe that this highlights a major problem of lack of supervision and inadequate equipment, and it speaks to this disconnection between the owners and their businesses, with their responsibility failing solely on their worker. And I don't think this just that simple. A lot of these people work there because that is the job that they can access to. Um, and it's not like they're 100% horrible people. I just, this sort of disconnection with the process also talks about the defensive method could be conscious or unconscious to not connect with what is happening in front of you, that is taking a life from a other being. So just putting the whole responsibility solely on the worker, I think is very, of course, unfair. But it's also, I have to recognize that could be other cases there where we can find that workers that are like 100% cruel people. I mean, in every case scenario of wildlife, we can find this kind of people. I just don't think that the majority of them are really aware of what they're doing in the day-to-day basis.
Very true. Now, Caroline, how does L214, and I'm sorry, I'm translating it to English, decide which cases to investigate and pursue? What criteria guide your strategic choices? Are these choices driven more by legal opportunity, scale of harm, the strength of evidence, or potential for public impact? And from the start of an investigation, to what extent is possible litigation already in view?
Okay, and I just wanted to add something on the previous question, if I can do so, 2 seconds. I don't know if it's the same in all the countries, but in France, the official veterinarian service is in the slaughterhouse, on the line where the animals are still alive. And it's very difficult for organization and even for the judge to say, well, I don't understand. You have an authority that can stop, that can change, and they don't say anything. So how can you tell me that the people working in the slaughterhouse or the director is about to do something for the animals because they are armed on the line of slaughter, as long as the official service of control doesn't find anything to say? And this is often very difficult for us because we don't have not only the slaughterhouse in front of us, we have the state, the state veterinarians that says, well, it was nothing very improper. It was okay. We see that often. It's not very a breach. It's not really a breach of regulation. So it's even if the law is very low to protect law to protect animals. This system is helped by the authorities who cover, finally, every breach of the regulation that we can see in slaughterhouse. So this was the small remark I would like to say. And to answer your question about L214 strategic choices, they are guided by multiple factors to maximize the impact. First, we will have to look at the scale of harm, which is always a primary consideration. So we prioritize cases where animal suffering is most severe and widespread, because we have to convince the judge. So if it's only one animal on the side, or if it's very small breaches in regulation, it won't be taken into account. So we have to look at that if there is a major and repeated breach of regulation. Then the second thing we look at is the strength, the force of the evidence that is brought to L214. And this is very paramount because L214 very meticulously documents the evidence that are brought to her by people who have access to slaughterhouses or farm or on the transport way. So the organization do this first job to say, okay, is this real evidence? Was it footage in a recent time, or is it very old? Do you have same image of the farm or of the slaughterhouse, or is it mixed? Is there a doubt about where the image come from? And then they give that to their lawyers in order for us to examine the videos that can be 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours. And this is our job before sending the complaint to the public prosecutor. It's our job to put in front an image, a video. What is the breach of regulation concerning? So this is to say, you see that on this image in this pig factory, in this cow factory, in this rabbit factory. You see that in the slaughterhouse, and this directly breaches this regulation. And it's not one breach, it's a breach that comes regularly on stunning, on unconsciousness, or on violent behavior of the people working in the slaughterhouse. So we have this work of the evidence to look at very precisely to provide the public prosecutor with a framework for interpretation and oversight. And we also emphasize that the fact that official veterinary services are supposed to be present on the slaughter line, and that doesn't mean that the practice we denounced are legal. And we have to really do this job by convincing the public prosecutor and then the judge, because the first reaction of a public prosecutor when we send them footage, videos, and a complaint is to ask the veterinarian, the official veterinarians, in order, and the public prosecutor asked them, is it right or is it wrong? And the problem is that they should have seen the problem before us. They should have tell the director not to do so, and they haven't done it. So they are in a difficult situation, but it's very important. And as long as we have the French state condemned for this inaction in the control, in the veterinary control in slaughterhouse, it's now more easy for us to say to the public prosecutor, you can ask them what they think about our complaint, but don't take it for granted, because they regularly have a big lack in their work of supervising. And the last thing I would like to say of the footage released by L214 is the potential for public impact, which is also crucial for raising awareness and mobilizing support from the public and the media.
That's so interesting to think about those things. You mentioned strength of evidence. So, Caroline, from your perspective as counsel, investigations that expose abuse can involve both legal and ethical risks, especially around how this evidence is obtained, recorded, and then made public. So how do you navigate those constraints while still ensuring serious wrongdoing is exposed and acted upon?
Well, first of all, under French criminal law, evidence may be established by any means. We say in France that la preuve est libre. So the simple lack of consent from the operator, from the director of the slaughterhouse, does not prevent us from taking action. And in fact, it's quite the contrary, because we have to recognize, even if it tends to change in the wrong way, and especially now where our political in the parliament is willing to take action against animal protection organization by criminalizing the fact of revealing animal abuse. But for a long period of time, we had French law grants significant weight to the freedom of expression, of association, on as long as it concerns matters of public interest. This is the term in French law. And as long as you're on matters of public interest, such as animal protection, you have a quite wide freedom of expression. Of course, we document the fact that farms and slaughterhouses are areas close to the public, where animals who are by definition confined and silent are very vulnerable. So it is therefore the duty of L214, but also other animal protection organizations, to denounce through legal and appropriate means the suffering and violation to which they are subjected, because no one else will do that. And we know that we have a lot of people against us, but we have also this freedom of speech. And we had a new law in France in 2021, which was very important, because it does not oblige, but it encouraged the organization to report the testimonies and the alerts that they received about animal abuses to the judicial authorities. So even if the footage are released against the will of the farmer, of the slaughterhouse, the duty given to the organization is to release this footage to the justice in order for them to have investigation. So this is quite important. However, and as I told you by beginning, actually in the French Parliament we have a severe action against animal organization by criminalizing up to 3 years of prison, of jail, for taking pictures into slaughterhouse, into farm, in order to release them to the public. So it's very important today, and this is why animal organizations take action so that the law that is not actually voted but in discussion doesn't pass, because it will be a very hard ban on our actions.
Very, very interesting. So let us now turn to Sabina. Sabina, animal law focus uses official records and public data to document repeated violations in farms and slaughterhouses and to press for stronger enforcement. How do you decide which cases or patterns to focus on, and when is research-driven administrative action the right strategy?
Well, of all the infringements that we have on record, that are many, not only relating to animal welfare, but also to animal health, which covers the management of infections and diseases. The Meat Act, that covers the sanitary management of animal products. We focus primarily on those concerning animal welfare. Of these, let's say 400, we focus on the businesses that we have received the most repeated fines over the specific period we are examining. From those selected companies, we request further documentation regarding the specific sanctioning processes, and then we categorize the violations according to the details set out in each file, those involving extreme cruelty, as we call them, such as those I have already mentioned, like the improper stunning, others involving poor management or handling, others concerning starvation, others regarding hygiene, and so on. From these files, we look beyond any administrative action we may take against these companies to see if there is sufficient potential to bring a criminal case for animal cruelty, which is a result-based offense and requires a large amount of evidence. But often the Agriculture and Livestock Service, that is in charge of the supervision of animal industry itself, they issues these administrative fines and concludes that a specific case is extremely cruel and refers the file to the public prosecutor's office to prosecute the offense of animal cruelty against the company. They're very connected between them. That does happen in some cases. Last year, a ruling was issued that I really loved a lot, that recognizes that animals intended for consumption or used in the industry should be afforded the same level of protection and welfare standards as any other animal. That was the ruling. As far as I know, no organization was involved in that ruling, only the public prosecutor's office. But that was because evidence was provided directly by the Agricultural and Livestock Service, which during their inspection determined that the breaches were sufficient to constitute animal cruelty offense, and they sent the case to the public prosecutor's office. When the research-driven administrative action is the right strategy, I think when you want to, I've been working animal advocacy from different areas, and I think each area, litigation, legislative, have a lot of pros, but also some cons regarding like the time or the resources that you put into. And I think the administrative action could be safer option in case just talking about time in comparison to legislative action. In my experience, we have had a better like time frame in which we have results with administrative action rather than legislative, and specifically when you have a government or you have a Congress that is majority right parties that are usually here in Chile against any animal welfare standard or huge advances for animal. You have to rely on the tools or the services that are not biased by these political views. because the Congress would probably delay any advance that you want to put for animals a lot of years. They would not be willing to pass a bill like that is the case right now. They took even like a specific time to reevaluate all the bills that we have right now waiting for animals in the Congress past month. So and that was because the Congress recently changed and the majority is of right parties. So they have another view from what is the animal welfare here in Chile. So I think the research-driven administrative action could be right strategy when you have like this hostile environment around you and you don't have like enough conditions to think that you will be successful in the short term for animals.
Following on this, Sabina, once you bring that evidence to the authorities, what has helped you get a response and what tends not to work?
Well, we are still finalizing the first stage of the project, which is the research phase, and we will soon begin the second stage, which involves engaging with authorities. However, we are very confident that it will go well, given the way we intend to approach it from a holistic perspective, focusing not only on animal welfare, but also on the interests we know the administration has beyond animal welfare. Personally, I have been involved in other processes with the Agriculture and Livestock Service that have led to the drafting of new protocols, binding protocols, where they were needed. And it all started with filing a complaint, something any citizen can do. And it was because it was specifically regarding a case of a wild bird that was mistreated. I made a complaint to the service, and they told me we don't have regulation about this, so we cannot do anything about it. I mean, there's no like infraction because there's no regulation. So I asked them to draft a protocol, binding protocol about this because it was necessary. That is the reason right now we have a specific protocol to how to treat injured wild birds that any service worker or other citizen can come across. So I think we have a good relationship with them, with the service, at least personally, and I think we have a good strategy on how we want to present these cases to them. Also considering that, of course, the possibility of gaining more resources or gaining more, collecting more money from fines could be a really good incentive for them. As any public service, the resources are not very like large, so um, any scenario there where they can collect more money will be really interested at least from my perspective.
Okay, so Sabina, animal law focus also works through corporate engagement and legal pressure directed at farms and slaughterhouses themselves. So when enforcement by the state is weak, how do you see the role of legal pressure on private actors, whether through complaints, corporate pressure, or future litigation, in challenging systemic abuse in slaughterhouses?
I think beyond complaints, because they are so used to have complaints against them, and they're so used to have violations. So I think that specifically the public pressure would always be the most decisive factor here in Chile. As I said earlier, we're not just seeing breaches of animal welfare standards. We focus on that primarily, but also we have looked for health and animal products handling regulations, where there is very poor hygiene and an inadequate sanitary management of the handling of the meat. People don't like that. When you tell them beyond the fact that animals suffer because not all of them may empathize enough with animals, that the company is also breaching health regulations, and there is every reason to question the quality of the product that stays inside Chile. because the exportations follow another kind of standards, higher standards. So the meat that follows lower standards are the meat that stays inside the country. When you tell them this, I think that it generates something in the people that can help us gain additional support if they don't connect with animal welfare. People find it hard to empathize with animals in the industry because they don't see them in the same way they see a dog or a cat. So we always seek to highlight other aspects of the industry that may be of greater interest to the public. Corporate pressure stems from that, as does negative publicity. But we don't go around naming and shaming companies. That is not our way on social media. It's not in our interest to be their enemies, even though we seek to the closure of several companies. That's part of a legal process. We are not making a shaming, public shaming of the companies, not at this process, because we also want them to see us as a partner they can turn to for improvement. We love to shut down all these companies tomorrow, but we know that's not how it works. Therefore, we rather stay an actor that these companies they can turn to us to improve what they're doing to animals inside these walls. um, Sort of like external actor, not involved with the government, not involved with the service, that can help them to go through these problems in case we don't have enough to close certain company. That's what we want to establish. That's the kind of relationship we want to establish.
Thank you, Sabina. Now back to you, Caroline. Have there been recent cases in which investigations, complaints, or litigation helped lead to sanctions, suspensions, or closures? And when a facility is sanctioned or suspended, does that usually make a lasting difference for animals? Do you have a sense of how often the same violations come back after authorities have already intervened?
Well, yes, we had recently numerous cases where our actions have led to suspensions, closures, and have led also to criminal conviction. And these rulings have resulted in financial penalties for the farmers or the slaughterhouse, and crucially also a judicial recognition of the state's obligation in animal protection. So you have three times in our work, our legal work, is the moment we release the complaint, then you have the investigation, and during all this moment, you have a real focus on the farm or on the slaughterhouse that can be closed forever or just closed for a moment until they do the job to correct what we have seen wrong in their process. And sometimes they are allowed to reopen after. And you have then the moment of the trial. And we do not have to underestimate how important and not very happy for them to have the investigation of the public prosecutor, the attention of the media, and then the trial. And now, not in all the trial, but some of them, the judge released the videos into court during the trial. So we have a quite important time where the judge and all the people who are in court can see the job we have done and the evidence we have brought to court. So this is really a very important moment where there is a judicial recognition of our work against the farmer or the slaughterhouse, but also because we like Sabrina said, we don't want only to focus on one farm, one slaughterhouse, because it's a more systemic problem. And now when we file a complaint towards a farm or a slaughterhouse, we immediately also do an administrative legal action to have a recognition of the state failure in the control and supervising of animal regulation in slaughterhouse. And now the judge, for the 10th case recently, said that we were right to file this request, and that France was enabled to enforce correctly the regulation of animal protection in farm and in slaughterhouses. So this is very important. We know also that the impact of a video and a complaint filed on the operator of the farm or the slaughterhouse should not be underestimated, as I told you. And when you are held accountable in this way, and that you can force them to modify their practices, to move always slowly, but towards greater compliance with regulation. And we know this is obviously not enough, but it represents a step forward. And as Sabrina said, it's also small steps in this kind of cases to make the animal production industry better considering animals. And however, we have to recognize whether these interventions make a lasting difference for animals is a very far more complex questions, because eventually immediate suffering might be alleviated by our complaints, by the closing of the slaughterhouse or the farm. The systemic issues often persist. So the fundamental shift in practices, in culture, and in economic models within the industry is required to achieve truly lasting change. And this is very, very long to do so. And this comes also by the consumer and the public.
Thank you so much for that. Sabina, when animal protection law is weak, can other legal routes like environmental or public health law help put pressure on slaughterhouses or public authorities? In practice, when is that useful to achieve meaningful enforcement?
I touched on this briefly in the previous answer, I think, but yes, I mean, when animal welfare is not enough by itself, we always consider health and even environmental factors. When these same companies fail to treat animals properly, they also fail to meet health and environmental standards, such as through poor waste management we have seen, which can lead to the contamination of groundwater that supplies neighboring properties within a considerable radius. They can damage farmers' crops that are also necessary for the advancement of plant-based diets. So plant growers also have a huge stake in this. They suffer from this like a collateral damage. Air pollutants also are generated, affecting entire neighboring communities through foul odors. This aspect help us to reassess, to gain public support, focusing on these aspects. But it also helps us to reassess where these companies can be established, the permits granted to them at a given time. We can ask to review them and to begin to limit their scope for operation. But I want to say just the thing about that, because I have seen other kind of interventions doing this same process of like limitation of their scope or the space of operation from these companies. We must be very careful with that, because with the issue of banning farms and slaughterhouses in certain areas, we must consider that if we ban them in one city, they will probably move to another that allows them to function, to operate with less restrictions. And we may end up turning places and entire cities into sacrifices zones that we say here in Chile. We have several. And if several such businesses begin to concentrate in that area, we can create more, like we can affect more to the communities around. Everything, I think, carries a risk that we must always be prepared to either avoid it or remedy it in case we there is no strategy that do not have a risk in like we this always there is no the perfect strategy. We have always have to put ourselves in every kind of scenario of possibility of results and be prepared to act regarding that. I think, yeah, definitely, I would say the public health and the environmental are two areas that have their own advocacy organizations and environmental, and we can use them to amplify our voice and unify our fight against these companies.
Thank you, Sabina. Final question to Caroline to conclude. Beyond investigations and litigation, how does L214 work to shift the narrative from individual violations to questioning the structure of industrial animal production itself? And where do you see the lost potential and its limits in challenging that system?
Yes, well, L214, it sounds weird when I say that, 214. Well, okay, L214, they don't just present isolated incidents. We explain why these abuses are endemic to a system which is driven by profit, speed, and efficiency, and where animals are treated like production units. So, and we achieve these through educational campaign, public debates, and also engaging with policymakers to highlight the systemic nature of the problem. So we talk with politics, and also L214 works very hardly with the industry to try to move away the more horrible abuses and to obtain step by step better practices for the animals, like so they can have a space for outside, that they won't have their tail cut for the pigs, that they won't be castrated without pain relief. So it's we discuss with the industry, and we urge them to take engagement on their website and publicly, to say, okay, we know that this practice are really abusing and harming for animals, and in 2, 3, 4 years we will be engaged to stop that, and to stop any buying products that leads to very abused practice. So you have L214 is a large organization today. You have like 100 permanent working with her every day. So we have the time and kind of luxury to go in different areas: educational, politics, industry, media, to have more impact and try to have laws and laws enforcement for the animals.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Sabina. Well, first of all, for all your work in favor of farmed animals, but also for taking the time to talk to us. For me personally, it was pretty special to be able to hear about your work, and to have so much insight into reality. So it's very helpful for us to learn all of that in order to bridge theory, law, and reality which is, of course, ultimately what we want, right? To change how animals are treated, to stop animal exploitation, and so on. Once more, this conversation fits within the broader goal of ICARE's Litigating and Legislating for Animal Rights series, which is to deepen our understanding of the evolution of animal rights law and advocacy, and to strengthen our collective capacity to drive legal and social change through creative approaches such as yours. Thank you so much for being with us today. And once again, Sabina and Caroline, thank you so much for the work that you do, from sharing your time, your experience, and insights with us. Conversations like today's remind us that advancing animal rights is not only a matter of legal technique, but also of imagination, courage, and sustained collective effort. And seminars like this are part of that process. So we hope you will continue this journey with ICARE and join us in the next sessions of our Litigating and Legislating for Animal Rights seminar series. Until then, thank you for being part of our community committed to building a more just and compassionate world for animals. Thank you. Bye-bye.